Welcome from me, Tom Clark, now a contributing editor at Prospect Magazine, to this little discussion to kick off what are for Prospect itself the 20th Think Tank Awards. They're the sixth with which I've been involved, but they're also the very first in which the event has been backed by Cast from Clay. And so I'm delighted that Tom Hashemi from there is joining me now. Hiya, Tom.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Now, I've been around think tank land a bit through my career, even before Prospect. I did things that kind of bumped up against it. But tell me, first of all, what drew you into think tank land?
Well, I first went into think tank land just after my master's, did a brief stint at a think tank as an intern, loading content onto a website. It's my first foray into think tank world. But more materially was, I guess, 5 years ago after the UK voted to leave the EU, I felt frustrated at the lack of engagement that I thought policy experts had in that debate and wanted to do something about it. So that was the origins of Cast from Clay as a business, and hence why we're sponsoring the Think Tank Awards. It aligns neatly with what we're trying to do in terms of recognizing those that are pushing the boundaries in the think tank world and driving it forward. And that's our kind of goal as a business.
And I mean, I know you've written a piece for us about kind of some of those themes of like expertise, communication, and never the twain shall meet kind of thing. I guess if you're running a think tank or if you're giving an award to a think tank, one of the things you need to think about in judging it or judging what you should do is who is the audience? And right. I'm not sure it's always the same sort of audience.
No, completely agree. I guess you have very different kinds of think tanks. And depending on where you are in the world, they have different pressures on them in different ways. You have the legal pressures if they're registered charities in the UK, or if they're 501c3 or 501c4 organizations in the US. I guess particularly in the UK, being charitable, there is a duty of public education. So the public is always listed as an audience. If you examine people's communications or organizations' communications, you may challenge to the extent to which they actually consider the public as an audience. There's also just different kinds of organizations and what they're trying to do. Those that look at niche areas of policy, I don't know, NATO, air policing of the Baltics, may feel they have less to contribute to a public debate than those that look at the politics of the health system, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing I've enjoyed about the awards over the years is the way that you can have success by going far and wide. And one thinks of an outfit like the IPPR on the centre left or Policy Exchange on the centre right, fingers in all pies. Yep. And building up teams that seem more salient at particular times. And then, on the other hand, we've had, I think it's called Beyond Zero Emissions, an Australian think tank that essentially was originally just about how you took the carbon out of the cement business, I think, and nonetheless cleaned up and won an award and was absolutely hailed because they nailed this very narrow little thing in an effective way and got governments to take notice and do things. So I definitely think, as probably with on the real battlefield, you've got kind of like closely honed tactical weapons that can really get a particular narrow job done. And then you've got the kind of heavy artillery that tries to blast once.
What are the big things you've seen over the years that have changed? How has think tank land changed over the 6 years that you've been doing the awards, but then the other years before you did the awards that you've been involved in this world?
Well, I think you've seen an evolution of both form and content. So in terms of like the content, I think that, think tanks you can go back to the 1880s if you want on the Fabian Society, but think tanks as we've kind of come to recognize them, the first wave where that terminology was widely used, things like the IEA started in the post-war period, and then particularly when you got the Adam Smith Institutes and others coming in the 70s, and they were kind of first and foremost they were defined by political mission to get people to think the unthinkable from a particular point of view. And I think that was still the core of it. Even though I was at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is much more expert than that when I first came in. But what's happened in the last 20 years is that many more think tanks, I think, have ended up in the kind of middle. So one thinks of things like the Institute for Government, right? It's come in and it isn't partisan. It's very, very expert and knows inside out how all kinds of things work. But it does seem to me to be animated by a kind of concern with that things should work properly. And so it's kind of advocating on behalf of experts rather than trying to acquire expertise in the service of a political mission, as say the Centre for Policy Studies was back in the day. So that's one contrast. But then the other thing, of course, is just form. Like, whereas when I came in still, I mean, it was starting to change within my first 2 or 3 years of doing it, but it was about a physical printed report.
Right.
And now it's much more about, the slideshow that you might do at an event and then publish afterwards. That's going to get looked at much more than the 30-page report. And things like infographics, some think tanks are getting good at them. I hope many more will get better, because sometimes it's just individual journalists doing that in a think tank like way, for example, over COVID. And you think like, yeah, there's still stuff for think tanks to get better at here.
Are you going to take that into, I know JRF have great comms already. Are you going to take that kind of focus on communications and bite-sized communications as opposed to chunky reports into your work there?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm working on projects with teams and I haven't spoken to them in much detail yet, so I mustn't judge it. But I think JRF is consistent with what I'm saying about the evolution of the substance, in that it is, it's trying to be both expert and an advocate at the same time. It's sort of, it doesn't just approach the facts instrumentally. It tries to really find out what they are and then work out in the light of its values what to do about them. So it's got that. But yeah, I think I see them already tweeting bits of research in a way that obviously, I mean, there wasn't Twitter 20 years ago, so people weren't doing that. And it'd be interesting to see if they want to get more into, I don't know, podcasting and other things. They want it, I think, in my first or second year of presenting the awards.
I never know whether to think of them as a think tank.
No, and I don't think they mind me saying I don't think they know if they are a think tank, because if they, again, it's another variety of the spices that we find here, is that it was traditionally a funder, JRF, right. And it would give grants to people originally in universities and then sometimes in things like think tanks as well to do particular bits of research. In the last 10, 15 years, it started doing more of its own research. And so then, it kind of rolled its tank onto terrain and picked up the award. I think it was 2017, but I could be wrong about the year.
So how do you define a think tank? What is one?
Well, I think it is something that is concerned with doing research with a hope that it will inform and maybe even move public policy. How does that work? Does that do it for you?
I'd go for that. Having research with the intent of influencing policy with that research, something like that.
I mean, it's interesting. In the last period, we've rationalized the categories because we used to have, European level awards, American awards and British awards, sometimes I think even rest of the world awards. But we've really just now tried to focus it instead on the different dimensions of what think tanks do. So sometimes it's subject areas, so you've got economics or whatever. And this year, because of that new salience on the ground rules of politics, there's a new kind of law and constitution category. I'll be particularly interested to see how that plays out. But then also just like who's doing the jobs that think tanks are meant to do really well. So, for example, who's been really effective at advocating for something, who's been really good at bringing people who matter, identifying the people that matter about if you want to influence a policy and getting them all around a table, convening power, if you like, and who's got the sparky kind of new idea that's just a bit different. So, we've got this one to watch category and also an innovation category. For the multitude of virtues or sins of think tanks, we're trying to capture them all in these awards now.
Sounds good. I guess we've often thought of think tanks as blending lots of different boundaries, and it's really hard to pin them down. And this is why I think you get such a spread of different kinds of organizations, from the academic to the advocate, that they just.
I think that's exactly right. And of course, the other side of this is it's mirrored in the judges that we attract, who several of whom are journalists, one or two of whom are academics. But we also got people who've really had their hands dirty on public policy. So Cathy Ashton, who was the European Foreign Policy Chief, Michel Barnier, Simon Stevens, recently departed as the chair of the chief executive of the NHS, Tom Fletcher, is a top level British diplomat, Bob Kerslake, who used to run the Home Civil Service, Jennifer Williams, who is a great voice for Manchester from a journalistic perspective. So they are as diverse as the tanks who are entering. So I hope that means that the kind of the whole thing gels together.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, it's not long now, is it? And I'm very much looking forward to joining it too. I won't be giving out the gongs this year for the first time, as I say, in 6 years or so. It will be, I think, Alan Rusbridger instead, the new editor. But it'll be great to see an event in person, and particularly this event in person. So please do join me and Tom and the rest of the team then.